Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Gigs or Get Into Game Stream. This month we have an exciting Prepare Yourself for GDC Survival Guide, where we're going to talk about, what do you do to get ready for GDC? How do you know that you have everything you need to go to GDC? And then, of course, how to survive at GDC. So this is more of a focus on like health, going to parties, like how to meet people, things like that, but not specifically about networking. We'll talk more about that next month. So this month I have joining me Karena Tyan. I think I said that correctly.
Yes.
And she will be, I just realized I was like, oh, do I know how to pronounce her name? And she will be introducing herself and then answering most of the awesome questions that everyone has, and we'll have a little conversation. So take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Karena. I am a producer and also a project manager. I've been pretty much in most areas of the industry. I've worked on console publishing, Facebook social games, Android casual games, Android basically a cross-compiler development at a tech company, as well as like AAA development. I was a art producer on like Lips, the karaoke title for Xbox 360 for anybody who likes to sing. And also more recently was like on Destiny as art producer there too, or associate producer. And I am basically, I love working with people who do creative and technological stuff really, really well. And I like talking to people. So that's how I became a producer. Yeah, that's my background in a really tiny nutshell.
That's awesome. Thank you. So let's start with talking about preparing for GDC. What do you do to get ready to go to GDC? Like, what are the things that you're like, I have to have shoes or something like that? What are the things that are most important, you think, for getting ready for GDC?
Yeah, shoes actually is top of that list, especially because I usually go, as a volunteer, and so there's a lot of standing and walking. But even as an attendee, you'll find yourself spending probably a lot more time on your feet than you usually do at a desk job. So, like good either shoes or that are either designed for walking or standing, or shoes that have good insoles, like Dr. Scholl's gel insoles, can be really good at helping save your feet and letting you walk around instead of hobbling around for all of GDC. Good shoes are good. Staying hydrated is really good. So a reusable water bottle is really handy. They do sell water at GDC and there's water fountains everywhere, but you're going to be in and out of sessions. You're going to be trying to, go to the expo floor and everything. And it's really easy for people to get dehydrated during GDC, which can, make you more susceptible to getting sick or getting tired or just feeling like crap. So drink water. Another thing I like, two key things that you should have ready. Business cards. This is for everybody. Whether you're looking for a job or you're just there to connect with people on either a personal or business sort of aspect, having your business cards ready is absolutely key. They're like the currency of GDC. So having them ready and having enough to hand out to the people you meet, super awesome. And part B is if you are looking for jobs, having your resume ready is really important. And I mean, not just printed versions of your resume, though you should have those, but also an online accessible version or digital just copy on a thumb drive or something, because you may need to print out more copies. You might need to make edits and print more copies then, or you might actually apply to some jobs on the Career Center where they have like these computer kiosks set up, and sometimes they ask you to submit your resume. So it's easiest if you already have a link to an online version, or if you have it handy with you on a thumb drive that you can just plug in and then apply from there. Otherwise, you're going to be typing everything from hand. So those are probably the top three things: good shoes, water bottle, and then your business card / resume.
Yeah, definitely. The shoes thing, I cannot stress this enough. I actually buy, like, if I know I'm going to buy new shoes, I buy them in December and I start breaking them in and I start figuring out if I need like insoles and stuff like that. And it's funny because this week I was like, oh man, I think I'm going to have to get insoles for these. And I start walking, get myself ready for GDC. People don't think about that. Like, you're going to be on your feet, you're going to be on hard concrete, either inside or outside, and you're just going to be like, my dogs are barking, right? Mm-hmm. So you gotta be careful about that. And of course, business cards and resumes, super important. I love that you said bring it on a thumb drive too, because I know for a fact people will be like, I'm out of printed copies and like I can't get access to the internet or something like that. And then someone's like, oh, there's like a Kinko's right down the street. You can just like pop your thumb drive in and print that stuff out, and it's super, super useful. So
yes, absolutely. There's also a FedEx office print nearby near the Moscone Center. So if you need to print business cards or resumes during GDC because you ran out or you just didn't have enough, well, actually that's the same thing, but then you can just get more copies. So even if you don't have it on a thumb drive, even though that is super handy because you may not have access to a computer unless you bring one, having one in like Google Drive or Dropbox that you can just pull out at a moment's notice and drop in a web link is super handy. So
yeah. I'm always like, if I run out of business cards, do I win GDC?
If you started out with 10, probably not.
I always come with like 2 boxes of like 500. So if I run out of business cards, I'm like, well, I think I met everybody.
Yep, there you go. I do definitely recommend bringing at least 200 to 250 initially.
Yeah.
So depending on what you do, if you do run out of cards during the middle of GDC, like literally on Tuesday you run out, there is also overnightprints.com where you can actually design your business cards and they'll ship it to you next day for, actually pretty inexpensive shipping, especially given that it is next day shipping. And they do generally, I think they're pretty cheap for about 250 business cards. So you can use this either prior to GDC or during it. If you run out of business cards and you need to get more, you don't want to just write down your information on scraps of paper and hand it out to people. Like, this is the classier option.
I actually had somebody one year give me a business card on a used public transit ticket. They just like wrote their name and phone number. And like we are like incredible friends now, years later. It was just like, Michael, phone number, and I was just like, "Is this a Mooney Pass?" He's like, "I ran out
definitely
of
memorable."
It was really funny. So, what about you talked a bit about, since we're still kind of on this packing vein, you talked a bit about like preparing for going on the show floor to interview. What kind of things do you think people should bring, like, to wear? Not to just the show, but like especially if they're going to like look for a job.
Yeah, that's actually a question you get a lot. So general rule of thumb for the industry is that nobody really likes super casual unless you're maybe in business or marketing. So it depends upon the position you're going for. But for most people who are going for production or design, engineering, or art, you can usually get away with what I call like nice casual. So it's like t-shirt and jeans is usually okay, and shoes that are decent, like they don't have obvious holes in them. Just avoid, like things that are saggy or ill-fitting or that have obvious stains or holes in it. Try not to go for anything like super risque if you're going for an interview, because people might be like, what exactly are you interviewing for? But just think, like you're dressing up to meet a friend that you haven't seen in a really long time. So you don't want to look super shoddy, but you also don't want to show up like dressed to the nines and people are like, whoa, hey, that's a bit much. I thought we were just here for lunch. That even goes for interviews. I mean, you can bring interview clothes, but again, like interviews in the games industry tend to be pretty casual. So wear what you feel comfortable in, something that you can breathe in, because sometimes, especially for ladies, if you dress up super fancy and like you're not comfortable, that shows in how you kind of carry yourself in the interview. So you kind of want to make sure that you feel comfortable when you're talking to companies that you really want to work for, because you don't want to be sitting there just like adjusting your clothes because they don't feel comfortable and like just feeling like you don't fit in your skin well. Like, just dress comfortably and without obvious holes. That's usually the good thing to go by.
So comfortable, not a risque, and not a lot of holes in your jeans. I think that's you definitely want to look professional, right? So you don't want to look like you just woke up. I have seen people roaming around GDC in pajama pants, but those people are better than us. So.
They've earned the right to wear pajama pants.
Exactly. What about researching companies and stuff like that? Is there a way that you can kind of check beforehand who's going to be there and do a little research?
Yeah, so usually on the GDC website, that's GDCONF, so GDConf basically, .com. They usually share a list of companies that are going to be on the expo floor and the career center beforehand. And I will say, as a caveat, like the career center has gotten smaller in terms of representation from companies in recent years. So it's become a little bit less viable than it used to be to job hunt at GDC on the Career Center. But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means that your pickings are going to be a little bit slim, depending upon what you're looking for. But it's still worth looking at the companies that are going to have a Career Center presence and figuring out which of these, like looking at their job listings, seeing where they are, seeing if there's anything you're interested in applying to while you're there. The expo floor is not quite as good of an option because they're there to demonstrate their stuff. They're there to, you know, either draw in potential clients or make business connections or just show off really cool stuff. So they're less likely to accept like resumes unsolicited. So if you strike up a conversation with somebody on the expo floor and they're like, hey, I really like you, I'd love to pass your information internally for something that we think you might be suitable for, then cool, give it to them. But I wouldn't just walk up to somebody on the expo floor and be like, hey, can you take my resume? Because, I mean, your booth looks shiny. It's probably not a great approach.
Take it.
But yeah,
take it.
Yeah,
take it.
Yes, take it. It's free. Why don't you want my free resume?
You just like
yeah,
stuffing people's swag bags.
Oh yeah. Here's my entire application packet. Here you go. It has like my portfolio, my CV that's generalized because I didn't have this prepped to you like beforehand. Oh, that's another thing actually. So if you do research the list of companies beforehand and you find some position that you actually really do want to go for, an in-person application can often be better than just like blindly applying online. So in that case, I would definitely recommend prepping a cover letter. So I was reserved that entirely for there's a position you're going for and the company you're aiming for, because cover letter should always be tailored to the position and the company that you're applying for. And in that case, yeah, prep it. Maybe even have a custom version of your resume that highlights all the details that are particular to that position. And that goes for any job application, by the way. And then basically prepare this packet to hand to them, and clip your business card to the top, because that's usually the 3 things you want to have if you're applying to a company on the spot: is your resume, a cover letter if you know what you're applying for, and your business card so they have all your business info really handily. I mean, it should be on your resume anyway, but this way they can kind of have both if they need it.
And one of the things that's really key, I love that you said put your business card like on there, is if a company is doing Career Expo, like they're not just literally there to take resumes, they're there for you to be the cover letter, right? So if you hand them a packet, they're going to read it, they're going to look at it, they're going to have a brief conversation with you, and then if they like you, they're going to call you back later. So making sure that your phone number is easily accessible and your phone is on is really important, because I actually remember my first GDC when I was in the Career Pavilion. I got a phone call like asking me to come interview, and I didn't have my phone like on properly, or the battery died. I don't remember. This was years ago, before smartphones, and I missed the call, and then of course I was like, oh, I blew it, and they did give that interview spot away, but I like walked over and apologized, and they're like, oh no, we'll just find another time. But it's really important that you have that information super ready for them to just look at, and instead of having to dig through, they're just like, oh, phone number.
Exactly. And actually that brings me back to business cards. So depending upon why you're at GDC, you might actually have more than one set of business cards. So some people bring business cards as well as personal business cards. So business cards are usually given to you by your company. So they'll be on like the official like company business card design and logo and everything, and you can represent yourself as an employee of that company. But depending upon your positions, some companies don't like that. So in those cases, I would check with your company and see if they're okay with you saying, hey, I am a developer at X company. Some companies are, oh, yeah, sure, that's cool. Talk to whoever. Just be careful not to give away confidential information, which is just, general advice. But some companies may actually ask you, don't tell people that you're from our company, because they reserve that for people who are creating business contacts or who are representing the company professionally. In which case, you may just want to create a good personal card. So I would recommend everybody have a personal card, whether you're there for business or not. And you can pick and choose what information you put on your personal card. Like I actually don't put my phone number on my personal card because I hate unsolicited phone calls. That's just me. But high recommendations are LinkedIn link. So you can create a personalized LinkedIn shortened URL, which you can include on your card. And that's super handy because unlike Facebook, you don't have to worry about these random contacts you make during GDC seeing all your personal information. That's your professional profile. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, make one, and then put it on your card. But you can also put, like, for example, if you're an artist, it's a really good idea to build an online portfolio where you can demonstrate your work, and link to that in both your resume and your business card. That can also work for engineers and other positions too, if you have work that you can talk about and show samples of where it makes sense to do that. But having an online presence of some sort, website, blog, portfolio, is actually a really handy tool for both networking and job application. So including that on your business card is really handy. So one thing that some people agree with, may not agree with, is having a headshot of yourself on your business card. I find it useful during GDC because you talk to so many people during the course of the week. It's actually sometimes really hard to remember who somebody was, especially if you only knew their first name. Like, you'll meet like 50 Matts. You're gonna be like, oh, there's that one Matt who was like that super thing that was like interesting, and I wanted to talk to them again, but there's like a Matt Parker and a Matt like blah 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 and a Matt, and you're like, which Matt was I talking to? So having a headshot on your card can help people remember who you were. And more important than that, in my personal opinion, having room on your card for people to write notes down on is actually super handy, because they can then just be like, oh yeah, remember to circle back on this guy about this thing that we talked about, or hey, this guy looks like he could be a good designer candidate for our company. And so having a non-glossy finish for your business card is usually my #1 advice for anybody designing their business card. If you have a glossy card, it looks great, it'll last, but it's going to be really hard for people to write on it in ballpoint or ink, gel. So have a matte finish if you can, and leave space. So like, don't have a dark background, and leave somewhere on your card that's not occupied by graphics or text that people can scribble just like a couple words down. And I think that's super useful to help people remember you after GDC when you're doing all your follow-up. So that's my business card design advice. Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I really wish someone had given me all of that advice years ago, because so I do the 2 business cards thing. So I have my business cards. A lot of companies don't give out business cards anymore. And then I have my personal business cards, and they're exactly the way you described. So on the front, I think I have like my name, and then I should have grabbed some, but I put, like a funny information. So I wear rugby jerseys all the time. So on the back it says like, I'm probably wearing a rugby jersey, and then it has my Twitter handle. But then the whole back is like almost a cardboard finish, so you can write your info or anything about me on there. But I love the headshot idea. That's really interesting, because I play my favorite game at GDC, which is I know you, but I have no idea who you are. Right? Like, I've met you 8 GDCs in a row. I can tell you who your family is. I can tell you all these things, but I don't know what your name is. So this is going to be fun, like, as we try and figure out each other's names, and then like you like introduce them to somebody next to you, just hoping that they'll say their name, because not everybody has their badge on all the time, right? So you're like, yeah, this is Tim. Tim, this is that guy. And he's like, I'm Raphael, and you're like, nailed it. Yes. So that's awesome advice about the cards. Man, you just did like, I was going to do a whole bit about cards, and you just did all the things I would say. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Efficient.
So since we're talking about cards, let's talk a little bit of post-GDC in regards to cards. So I have a bunch of cards, handed out a bunch of resumes. Now what do I do?
All right. So basically, how do you manage all those business cards that you get during GDC? There's a couple different ways. My first piece of advice for anybody is bring a rubber band to GDC. And at the end of every day, band together your business cards. You might want to rifle through them and write down notes that you maybe didn't have time to scribble down during the day while you still remember who these people are. But basically, just having a good place where you can collect all your business cards is key. Most people forget to bring a box or a Ziploc bag or a rubber band just so you can collect all those business cards. During the day, where you can stash them is usually the back of your badge folder. There's usually a little pocket where you can stuff business cards. You can either put yours in there or somebody else's in there. The only thing to watch out for is badge holders can split if you stuff it too full. This has been known to happen in previous years, and people lose their very, very expensive badges. So if you're gonna stuff stuff in the back of your badge holder, tape the bottom and tape the edges to make sure you don't lose the stuff that you actually care about. But keeping them in the back of that, or putting them in a purse or a shoulder bag of some kind where you have them all in one tiny place, that's really handy. That's just basically keeping your business cards. Another way that people often keep track of their business cards is something like there are apps on both iOS and Android that allow you to take a picture of a business card and it'll automatically scan the contact information if it's readable. And it basically helps you create a little contact directory, and you can add meta information like your own notes on that, like what you would normally write on a card. And that's a good way to keep like your physical kind of mess down, because as soon as you have the info, you can just toss it. So that's actually really, really handy. Like one I used is paid, but it's called CamCard, so it lets you do that, but that's a few years old. And there's a lot of really good business card apps out there that you can use. What I would do after GDC, once you have all this business card information somewhere, physical or digital, follow up. So it depends. Like, so most people wait a week. I would actually just recommend as soon as you get home, contact the people that you definitely want to follow up with. Like, you know, contact them, make the contact request on LinkedIn if they give you their profile, or even if they didn't, LinkedIn stalk them and then add them. Saying, hey, I met you at GDC, we talked about this, I don't know if you remember me. But, you know, like, make sure you include some context of how you guys met each other. That's actually, I think, a mistake a lot of people make, is that they're like, I have this business card, I don't remember what I talked to them about, I'm just going to trust them to remember, and then just like, hey, we met at GDC, and then that's about it. And like, there's no meaningful connection at that point. So that's why it's actually important for you to take notes on business cards that people give you too, is so you can remember what you talked about and what, if anything, you wanted to follow up with them about after GDC. So yeah, email them after GDC, being like, hey, it was great meeting you. I love talking about X with you. I hope in the future maybe we can follow up on Y. And then be like, give any contact information that wasn't on your card, like, oh, I didn't have a LinkedIn profile then, or I didn't have my phone number on my card, here it is, like that kind of thing. But make sure you follow up in a timely manner. A lot of people wait too long, and then like a month after GDC, you're like, oh yeah, hey, we met last month, and you're like, I don't remember you anymore. So yeah, follow up with people. And then if it is a relationship that you're trying to forge, like say in a business, like say you are a freelance artist and you're trying to get new clients, follow up if it makes sense. If this was somebody who seems like they have work for you, do the initial follow-up. If it makes sense, follow up with them again in the future. A lot of business people have contact relationship managers, CRMs, that basically let them set reminders, just be like, hey, get back in touch with this person in 2 weeks or 1 month. And then they will literally on the clock contact the people who were slated to be followed up with on that day, because that way they can make sure they forge meaningful relationships with people that they met at previous conferences. So you could do that if you're trying to build your professional network. And yeah, so just make sure you follow up. Yeah,
that's super cool. And like I said, next month, we will have a whole thing on networking, but that is a great, like, kind of follow-up stuff, especially. I used to do this thing, and it got way out of hand, where I had a notebook, and I would tape someone's card, and then I would write info that I learned about them underneath it. And I did that for, like, then Facebook came around, and like, just, I didn't need it anymore. Right? Because
basically you created your own dossier.
Yeah, I still have it. And it's awesome because I can look back at it, and some of those people have become like my best friends, like not just in the industry, but in the world. Like I have all this like little information. I'm like, oh, we had dinner together. Interesting. You know, you had tacos and you like fish tacos, you know, it's just random information. Awesome. But it is really important that, it's really important that you have that, you give that info of how you met, because like for me, especially, I recently have, like, I make people tell me how we met when they add me on Facebook, because if you can't remember how we met, I don't know if you're actually a real human. But also, if you can't remember, then we don't have a relationship yet. So Facebook especially is like a more personal thing for me than a business thing. I'll accept anybody on LinkedIn, man. I don't care. But you know, that's really important. Even when you're sending a LinkedIn invite or whatever, you kind of give a little bit of information of like, hey, this is how we met. You know, like, we stumbled into a bar together and got thrown out, you know? Like,
yeah, just keep in mind, you're trying to stand out or help people remember you after they've met like literally hundreds of people in a single week. There are like psychological studies on like how many faces people can hold in their memory before they start wiping out old records to make new ones. So make sure you're one of those limited spots like in their mind, or that they can at least recall who you are when you want to reconnect with them.
That's super key. So let's talk about outside of the conference, right? So let's talk about parties and doing things that aren't necessarily at the conference center itself, but like how do you find parties? How do you go to parties? Like, is it best to go in groups, or what are your thoughts kind of on the whole party side of it, which are really networking opportunities?
Good question. Yeah, it's a good networking opportunity, but you do also want to be a little bit careful. So side note, disclaimer, I'm not really a party goer myself. I tried that out for the first couple of GDCs I went to, and I honestly it's usually noisy, really crowded, and I couldn't really make that many meaningful connections myself because I was also new to the game. Now I know better. I could probably do better now. But in general, finding parties, there are a few official like GDC sponsored events and parties like mixers. That's actually how I got one of my jobs. I went to a GDC sponsored mixer, and I met a recruiter there who had the same name as me. It was a great connection. So there are the official ones, and those are on the website for the website for GDC official, and they'll increase that list as you get closer to GDC. Right now, I think it's just like a few of them. There's the lounges, so like usually, for example, Microsoft will have a sponsored lounge in one of the lobbies, and usually if you stick around there and you actually have a conversation with some of the people who are managing the lounges, they'll let you know about any parties that their company may be having, because they have those especially to make networking possible. Like, they are trying to recruit good talent, they're also trying to make business relationships. So big companies often throw parties. There are also a lot of private parties that are only known because you know somebody at the company, or you hear of it from word of mouth, or you get word of it before GDC and you had to do this like super fast, ultra secret like RSVP process. Like Notch has had a party for the last few years where you had to RSVP like weeks in advance, and like the RSVP spots just like went like instantaneously gone. So there's always some of those, and often those can be mixed bags. Sometimes they're really good events, sometimes they're really bad events. But the thing to keep in mind is that this is a professional conference. So keep in mind why you're going to these parties. Are you there to have fun on a personal basis, or are you there to make business contacts, either because you're looking for a job or because you are representing your company or you're a freelancer or whatever? But in all respects, don't do anything that makes you lose face. You are working with people who are either your colleagues already or could potentially be your employers or colleagues in the future. Don't do anything that you may regret in the future. Yeah. Like, oh, why did I drink so much and take off my pants and dance on stage? That was a terrible idea. Like,
everyone remembers you though.
You are very memorable, but possibly infamous. So keep that in mind when you're at all these parties. Make sure that you're getting what you want out of these parties when you go to them. So when you go to parties themselves, like, it's often really fun to go with friends, either people that you met at GDC or that you already knew beforehand. But it can often be good because if the party sucks, at least you have somebody you can talk to and still have some fun with. But most importantly, as with any party situation with strangers, like, they can also help keep an eye out for you. Like, GDC parties aren't generally dangerous, but it's always good to take a few precautions. So having somebody to watch your drink, for example, is always A+. Yeah. But also because that way, if you guys decide to go to other parties, like, a lot of the parties take place in south of Market, so Soma, which is not actually the safest place of San Francisco, particularly at night. So basically, Moscone, for anybody who's not as familiar with the area, it takes place there. Basically, 4th and Howard is right between the 3 buildings at the center. Mm-hmm. And if you go anywhere past 5th or 6th Street, so as you go towards the numbers that increase, 6th Street, 7th, 8th, 9th, etc., that's actually a pretty sketchy area. You don't want to travel there alone at night. And similarly, if you go north of Market, so past Market Street coming from Moscone, that's the Tenderloin District, and that's also pretty sketchy. A lot of hotels are in this area, so you'll typically be okay. But in general, we advise against traveling alone at night. If you have to travel alone, taking an Uber or a Lyft for a short distance can often actually be worth the money. In previous years, because people know GDC is going on, there's a lot of muggers. They target people who are conference goers.
Yep.
So if you look out of place, they will target you. So some advice, if you're walking on the streets, even if you're with your group, hide your GDC badge. Put it inside your jacket, put it inside your shirt, put it in your bag. And like, you're going to probably have to take it out for any parties you go to because they usually check for badges at the door. But don't make it obvious that you're a visitor to the town. Travel in a group. Avoid really sketchy looking alleys. Like if it's dark and not well lit and it smells like pee, probably don't go down it by yourself. Stick to like 4th Street. 4th Street's pretty well lit and populated. 3rd Street's also pretty okay. And Market itself usually has enough traffic on it where you're going to be okay. But try not to walk alone. Use ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft. Look for the promo deals. There's usually a GDC promotion deal that will get you some like $20 of credit or something that's like worth a ride or two within like San Francisco. And travel with friends whenever possible. It'll keep you safe and you'll have more fun that way. So.
Yeah. Wow, you hit on a lot. And I'm going to come back to the parties thing, but I want to talk about the safety thing especially because was it last year or 2 years ago, one of the guys who got mugged was bigger than me, right? So I'm 6'3", I'm a big dude. I've played contact sports and I've been in a lot of fights. But this dude was bigger than me and he got mugged and he got beat to the point that he had to spend like 3 or 4 days in the hospital and he was from Europe. So it really is like, it's not a great area. I've stayed in, and first night I walked a roommate, and the rest of the time I spent the $5 to $10 to get a cab because I felt unsafe walking. And it is definitely like something that I've taken on. If I stay in certain areas, I just know now, pay for the cab. It is worth it for sanity, safety, and your feet.
Yeah, and you know, just the tip, if you don't have a smartphone that you can use the ride sharing apps on, the Marriott is right down the street from Moscone and they have a taxi stand in front. So you can call a taxi from there if you need one, and it is super convenient. They don't care if you're a hotel guest or not, but that's an easy place. Also in front of Moscone itself, there's like a little drive-through loop, and there's often several cabs there, especially during the evening time, that you can take from there. So if you need a cab and you can't take an Uber or Lyft, that's always a good option. Also, yeah, just as a note, smartphones, if you do have a smartphone, try not to walk around with it like this in front of you. It may be better in recent years, but a few years ago, there was actually a rash of just muggings, I guess you could. They're not really muggings. There's literally somebody would run by you, snatch your phone from your hand, and just run. So a lot of people were getting their phones stolen because they were walking around with it like this. So if you need to use your smartphone, be smart, maybe stop and like turn towards a wall or something like that. Make it yourself a little bit less of an obvious target and hold on to it tight. But it also helps make you a target, right? Because smartphones are valuable. Yeah. So hide your badge, hide your phone, hide your kids, hide your wife. I'm good.
Stealing people. They're mugging people up in here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back and comment on the parties a little bit. So I used to be I would say a pretty heavy party goer at GDC. I think part of getting older, wiser, I'd like to say, is that I tend to, and this is, if it's not your first GDC, then this probably won't be available to you, but I tend to go towards the smaller and smaller parties because what's kind of happened over the last 5 years is that there's fewer parties and they're bigger, like open to the public parties, and they're huge and they're loud, and I don't really find any value in those because I can't have a meaningful conversation with anybody. People tend to just be drinking a lot and not really, like, some people are just there to blow off steam. That's fine. That's their prerogative. But I get my value out of GDC by having conversations with new people or people that I've known for years, right? Yeah. So for me, I don't find a lot of value in those parties. Sometimes I'll make an appearance because someone I know invited me or it's their company, and it's just the right thing to do. But a lot of times now I tend to go to like people's hotel rooms or suites. And then some of the local studios will throw smaller parties. Well, they're harder to get invites to, but those are the ones that I get a lot of value from. I've been able to meet like not only great friends and contacts, but even some of my like industry heroes, just like in someone's like hotel room. Like, you know, somebody will walk in and I'll be like, oh man, well, there's only 8 of us here, so I guess we're going to talk tonight. and it's really awesome. But there's value in those parties. I mean, I kind of got a bit of a job offer at a rave at GDC. So
Yeah, you can make connections anywhere, honestly. Yeah, and like the plus side of parties, even though I don't go to them myself, is that it is kind of a social lubricant. You're all there in a more casual setting. You don't feel that pressure of like, hey, we're all professionals here. So you can, actually have conversations with people where you're not just like feeling the pressure of being like, I am worth hiring and connecting with you.
I want a job.
Please help me into the industry.
That's really key, that while you're at the parties, don't even really talk about hiring or jobs or resumes. There you are clearly there to make friends and connections and get to know people, and then maybe later, unless you're going to like a Microsoft Blizzard or Epic like recruitment party, then it's like go find the people trying to hire you, because that's the point.
Right. So. Yeah. And I know you're gonna have like more of an in-depth networking session next month. But just like a general rule of thumb is that you're at a conference with a lot of people who have similar interests to you. Y'all like games. So that's always a safe place to start. But even if it's not just games, like people like talking about themselves. So just conversation 101, if you're not really a social person and you sometimes have trouble figuring out what to say, ask the other person about themselves. Like, what do you do? Where do you come from? What do you like to do? Do you have any pets? Like, ask questions like without interrogating them. Like, that's actually the fine line you have to walk, because like you don't want to make it seem like a police interrogation that you're trying to suss them out as a suspect. But like generally asking somebody about themselves and asking them to talk about themselves is a good conversational segue. If you stick to just talking about yourself, it can get kind of awkward sauce. So unless they ask you about yourself, in which case, sure, answer their questions. But try to avoid talking entirely about yourself, because conversation 101, nobody really likes that unless they really find you interesting as a person. In which case, sure, talk about yourself.
Yeah, I think that is really key. Just ask questions. I mean, I've made good friendships by just asking people questions the whole time and like not saying anything about myself other than my name. And then like after GDC, they're like, I just realized I never asked anything about who are you. I'm like, oh, hey.
Which is a good follow-up conversation, right? Gives you something to talk about after GDC.
Yeah, definitely. So the last thing I want to hit on before we start getting to questions is the actual survival of GDC. So we talked a bit about the safety of San Francisco and things like that. But what about like, you talked about being hydrated and good shoes, but what other kind of tips do you have about like preventing sickness or sleep or anything like that?
That's actually a good question. So there's a couple parts of this. So sickness, sleep, and also money is something I want to talk to you about a little bit, because some people get caught off guard with that third one. But for sickness, GDC is basically a plague fest. Like, there's always a GDC plague that goes around, and you'll hear of all these industry like professionals being like, oh, everybody in the city is out sick from the GDC plague. But you can do your part in helping keep the GDC plague under control if you wash your hands a lot. This is actually something people neglect a lot. There are bathrooms on every floor at either end of the like session hall. Wash your hands with, if they have it, warm water and soap. Sometimes the water's just cold and you're just stuck with cold water, but do your best. But like seriously, actually wash your hands. Some people have this bad habit of getting soap and just kind of going like this and rinsing it off. Do the finger scrub. Do the thing you see on like doctors do on TV where you actually wash between the spaces. You do the 20 seconds thing, because I promise you that 20 seconds of hand washing is going to save you from like a week of feeling miserable. So wash your hands. If you are sick, if you cough or sneeze, cough into your elbow. A lot of people don't do that because they were taught, like just cover, and they use their hands, and then you go and shake hands with people, and that's just kind of gross. Or you touch the escalators. Everybody touches the escalator railings. So don't cough or sneeze into your hands. Cough or sneeze into your elbow. This is what we teach kids. Make sure if you want to, bring Purell. Purell, you can buy them at the Walgreens or the CVS nearby or the Target. And you just use it. Every time you shake hands with somebody, use it. I mean, like, they're not going to take offense. They're not going to think you're like, oh, hey, nice to meet you, plague victim. Like, they'll understand. You're shaking hands with a lot of people. So Purell, wash your hands. Like, if you're going to, like, try not to touch the escalator railings if you can safely. If you're going to fall over, obviously use them. But basically, do your part to partake in basic public hygiene. If you're going to use the bathroom, wash your hands. I don't care how clean you think you are. You're not that clean. I promise you. So wash your hands. For sleep, a lot of people run themselves to exhaustion during GDC. Like, this is a particular note we often tell like first-time volunteers in particular, is that it's really easy to want to do everything, and it's impossible to do everything and still have a satisfying GDC experience. So there's like a couple ways I feel like you should manage this. And like, number one, prioritize your schedule. Like, figure out, what are you trying to get out of GDC this year? Are you trying to get a job? Are you trying to meet as many people in the industry as possible? Are you just trying to make new friends? Are you trying to attend sessions? Like, basically everybody has a few like top goals for what they're trying to achieve at GDC. So really focus on those top goals instead of trying to do everything. If it comes down to, for example, going to a party versus being able to go to a session that you really want to go to tomorrow morning, maybe you should go to sleep earlier tonight, get a full night's rest so you can get up in time to get to that session early, and especially if it's going to be a packed session, you want to get in line early, and go to it instead of going to a party that you may or may not have a satisfying experience at. So sleep is really important. Staying hydrated, like I mentioned earlier, is also really important for both not getting sick and also making sure you're healthy and rested enough to get through GDC. But let's see, I'm rambling a little bit. But if you have trouble sleeping, like if you are a light sleeper like I am, or you have trouble adjusting while traveling, bring sleeping aids. A lot of people forget about this. Again, you can get these at Target, CVS, Walgreens. But earplugs, eye masks, sleeping pills if that's safe for you, or like melatonin. Develop a ritual if you can, like before coming to GDC that can help you like kind of wind down at the end of a long and exciting day and get like a good restful night's sleep. Because you don't want to be, if you don't get enough sleep, if you don't rest enough, you're going to get sick. So that's like part and parcel of the entire staying healthy thing. So yeah, prioritize your schedule, figure out what your top priorities are, wash your hands frequently, bring Purell if you want to, and make sure you can get a good night's sleep pretty much every night for whatever the minimum number of hours are for you. And those are my top tips for that. The third thing I was just going to mention very briefly is cost. A lot of people underestimate how expensive GDC is. And I'm not just talking about the price of the pass. You know that beforehand, but a lot of people underestimate, for example, the cost of food in San Francisco is higher than a lot of places. So if you don't budget for that, you can find yourself spending way more money than you expect to during the week. There's a lot of coffee shops near GDC where you can get breakfast. There's also 2 food courts within walking distance, and there's also a number of restaurants. But basically for dinner, you can expect to spend at least $20 per meal, $15 to $20 on the low end, $25 on average, $30 is not unusual. Lunches will probably run somewhere between $10 to $15. Depending upon where you go and what you get. Breakfast will probably be around $10 if you get like a pastry and a drink. But San Francisco is expensive. Other things that may be unexpected costs is, like I mentioned before, ride-sharing apps so you can stay safe. Traveling from San Francisco Airport to GDC is something people often don't realize there's cheaper options of doing. The taxis at GDC at the airport are extremely expensive. There are much cheaper and also very convenient options to get you from the airport to Moscone Center or your hotel. My top recommended option is actually Super Shuttle. It's basically a shared ride van that you can book in advance, or if you're coming from the airport, you just go to their stand and pick it up from there. It's $17 flat fee from SFO to anywhere in downtown San Francisco per person, one way. So $34 total round trip, and that's much cheaper than, on average, a taxi or an Uber or a Lyft will cost you over $40 one way for a single taxi, which you can share with people, but still it's expensive. The cheapest option is BART. It's like $8.65 for one way coming from the SFO station to one of the stations in downtown Market. But the inconvenience of that is that you still have to do a lot of walking at both ends to get to your hotel or wherever. And also the BART has limited hours. So if you're arriving really early in the morning, or if you're trying to get there really late at night, most of the BART trains stop running a little bit before midnight. So if you're traveling at odd hours to save money on flights, you're probably going to have to take a Super Shuttle, which runs at all hours. So just to keep in mind, take Super Shuttle if you can. You can RSVP it in advance, even as soon as the night before. Sometimes I wouldn't risk it. You can take it to and from the airport, and it is, again, $17 per person one way, and that's the cheapest option. So remember, food is expensive, travel is expensive within GDC, and then you also have your hotel cost, your pass cost, your flights cost. and any other number of accoutrements, but those are like the main costs that people sometimes underestimate for GDC, which can drive you into the ground, especially if you're a poor student. So keep that in mind. If you are a poor student and you can't even afford to eat at restaurants, you can also buy some, I mean, I don't highly recommend this because it's not super healthy, but Target, the city Target that's on the same block, actually has some pretty affordable like instant meal options or meal replacement bar options, which is not, again, great. But if you can't really afford much, don't forget that's actually an option, like snacks to supplement you through the day and keep your energy up. And yeah, so that was a lot of information.
That was incredible. I was just like, wow, I didn't even know all this stuff. I mean, the super shuttle, that was one that I learned the hard way, and I always super shuttle now. The food thing, yeah, the cost is really high, but I always get breakfast at Target or the Walgreens nearby. It's cheaper and it can be healthier because you can get fruit and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a lot of incredible advice all at once. So don't worry, if that was way too much, you can watch this again on using the same link, and I will probably watch again and take notes because that was pretty great.
I'll also write something down. I haven't been able to write it yet, but I'm gonna clean up a version of a doc that I wrote for volunteers at GDC, and I'm gonna put all this in there. So I'll share that with you once I have it ready.
Amazing, that's awesome. All right, let's get into some questions here. We got about like 15 minutes left, and we got a bunch of questions that have come in. So the first three are from Matthew Baker. How do you effectively pick the talks that you'd like to see, and what tips do you have on finding the winning talks and protecting yourself from getting stuck in the duds?
That's always a tough one. I mean, to be honest, there's no 100% guarantee method of picking all winners. Like, this is like a horse race. I mean, okay, no, that's terrible. I'm comparing speakers to horses. But one thing you can do is you can basically check out who the speakers are. So number one, take a look at the session scheduler on the GDC conference website and pick out all the sessions that look or sound interesting to you and build your schedule. And then for every time slot, basically kind of prioritize your talks in terms of what seems most interesting or relevant to you. But one thing you can do to help kind of figure out that priority is look at the speakers. Some speakers have spoken at previous GDCs, which is usually a good sign. You collect feedback from the audience after every session. And if a speaker gets a lot of bad markings, they're not likely to come back to GDC. They're not going to be invited back to be a speaker again. But if they've done good or decent talks in the past, they will probably be accepted back as a speaker again. So seeing if somebody's a repeat speaker is one way to tell. A second way to tell is look at the speaker's own kind of like history. Like if they've worked on projects or at companies that are interesting, relevant, or well like reviewed, basically, they may have a lot of interesting lessons to share with you. I'm not knocking people who don't have like well-lauded like they're not like, oh wow, won GDC like awards several times in a row and has consistently like rewarded Critics' Choice Awards and stuff like that. It's like, no, like, okay, there's gonna be like indie developers who may have good lessons to learn, but don't have all that under their belts, and that's fine. But that is one way where, like, if you're trying to learn, for example, if you're in production, like me, and you're trying to figure out like good production techniques for a large scale team, you're going to probably want to look at producers who have experience working at large teams and large companies producing successful projects. So that's one way to help you kind of like narrow down the criteria of which talks may or may not be more useful for you. But basically prioritize for every time slot according to whatever criteria you determine which talks are most interesting to you. And from there, you can narrow it down to like this. If you are a volunteer or if you have an all-access pass, you will have access to the GDC Vault afterwards. And even if you don't have a pass that includes that, you can pay for a membership afterwards. It's $495 for a 12-month subscription to GDC Vault. And that gets you access not only to the talks this year, but all previous years and all other GDCs. That's totally worth it because then you can watch recorded sessions at your own leisure. So you can also basically narrow down which talks you go to see in person based on what you think is going to be like you could just watch on Vault later. And in that case, I would prioritize the talks that have speakers that you may want to talk to afterwards or who you might want to ask questions of during the session. And I would go to those talks first. So that's my general advice for helping kind of like pick your sessions.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I always find like 2 per slot, and then if I actually have time, then I go. But if not, I watch a lot on the vault, and I tend to only go to the ones that I want to either ask a question or be able to talk to the person right afterwards. If you're not quite sure, if you're worried it might be a dud, sit kind of in the last 3 or 4 rows and just get up and leave.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
It is rude. It is totally rude, but you spend a lot of money to be there, and if someone is not living up to it, just leave. And
quietly. Don't throw a table.
Yeah, but if you come to my talk and you leave, I will find you. So don't do it. Okay. But if you want one that's quality, just I'll be speaking. I don't know what day it is, but swing on by. Shamelessly plugged. Yes. So we already answered some of these questions. So if you asked a question and you're like, why isn't he reading my question? It's because we already answered it. So what's the best place to eat while at GDC, in your opinion?
Oh, that's really tough because what I like to eat changes vastly depending on my mood. There's a lot of good options around there. I personally like going to a secret place that I don't like to share publicly, but it's a little bit far away from GDC.
Don't share that one.
That one I'm going to keep, close to myself. But there's it's not the greatest shawarma place, but it's often overlooked for some reason. But literally across the street from Moscone Center, there's a shawarma place called the Oasis Grill. And they're actually a pretty decent shawarma place for if you're looking for something quick, satisfying, and savory. And they also often have, my favorite part is they have, imported snacks and desserts that you can partake of. So you can just have, I don't remember what they are. They're, European and or Mediterranean snacks. But yeah, it actually usually isn't super crowded because people like to go places a little bit further away. So it's a nice place to go if you just want to grab a quick bite to eat. But there's always the Metreon too. The Metreon food court is really great. They have pretty good restaurants there pretty much for any cuisine. And they also have share tea, which if you have not had bubble tea or boba before, you have to try it. Just a warning, share tea is really highly caffeinated for milk tea. So don't have it too late because you will not be able to get that very important sleep that we talked about before.
Yeah, there's there's 2 food courts right there because there's the one in the Metreon, and then there's the one in the mall as well, which is right there. And then there's restaurants everywhere.
Cheaper.
Yeah, down the street where there's a diner called Mel's. There's a bunch of food on that street there. And they unfortunately took the meat pie store was, I believe, closed last year. So that's sad. But for me, it's always crepes. I eat a lot of crepes while I'm at GDC because they're the best crepes you can get outside of France are in San Francisco, in my experience. So let's see, what else do we have here? So you answered this one really perfectly, but I'm going to ask the question just so I can reiterate your answer. From JDB, go to parties even if you are incoherent and tired, or go to bed for the next day. Go to bed. Yeah. How does one, from JDB as well, how does one generally end up with a scheduled interview while at GDC? Do you have any experience with this?
I have a little bit. To be honest, like I said, the Career Center has diminished over the last few years. So to be perfectly frank, the number of companies that give on-site interviews is already pretty small to begin with. It's even smaller now. Generally, to get an on-site interview, there are some companies that always do this. Blizzard used to do this. I don't know if they still do. They used to actually prepare for having on-site interviews. And so the way you do this is you talk to the recruiter at the table, you have your application materials ready, and you know about the company that you're applying for. So again, that preparatory step of researching companies before coming to GDC is really important. But basically, you want to make a strong impression of your being a good candidate for one of the positions they have open to the recruiter so that they can put you on the on-site schedule. In some cases, I think the way Blizzard used to do this, because I don't know if they do this anymore, they actually used to have almost a walk-in basis interview line. There would always be a very long line of potential candidates near the Blizzard booth. And the thing that you had to watch out for there is that you're going to spend a huge chunk of valuable GDC time waiting in line for a potential interview that may or may not get you an actual interview. in these cases, it may be useful, especially if you are really brand spanking new and have never gotten feedback from an industry professional on your resume or portfolio. They can often give you that advice and feedback. But it's really, there's no tried and true way to get an on-site interview except for to basically connect with the recruiter and make yourself seem like a very valuable candidate that they may want to talk to right now. Yeah, unfortunately, that's all I can really say.
Yeah, that's basically been my experience too. Just sometimes you get one, sometimes you don't. It just is whatever the company is trying to do at that time.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll shorten the question, but does the Expo Pass give a person enough access to be able to successfully network at GDC? From Jacob Argan.
Yeah, so I looked into this a little bit. So most non-GDC sponsored parties will accept any badge holder except for student. So if you have a student badge, that is the most limited badge you can get, even in terms of networking. There's very few non-GDC parties that will accept a student, largely because a lot of these non-sponsored events will be alcoholic and 21 plus. So if you have a student pass, the chances that you're underage for drinking is very high, and they won't let you into their event. So that can drastically limit your networking opportunities. The Expo Pass itself does not give you access to GDC-sponsored parties and mixers. That's actually on their website if you do the pass comparison. So in that way, it can limit your networking opportunities because you will miss out on stuff like the Microsoft Mixer or any of the large company-sponsored mixers that are on the events and networking part of the GDC website. So yeah, the Expo Pass will get you onto the expo floor, will let you into the center, will let you attend like limited advocacy sessions or roundtables where you can talk to people, but it may limit your ability to get into some social events, namely the sponsored ones that are GDC official. So that is something to keep in mind. Unfortunately, the next step up is pretty expensive, but it would get you into access into stuff, and I think that's the audio pass. Does get you access into the sponsored mixers and parties. So it's kind of like it's better than student, definitely, but there are some limitations to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think at least for my first GDC or two, I would spend the money to go to get the full experience and stuff like that. Once you have more and more contacts and are going just for the social aspect and the networking aspect more than anything, and you have those connections to get into the other parties, then maybe it's not as valuable. I still find it worth it just for the GDC Vault, which I use all year round, and I'll reference it and have other people watch videos at work and stuff like that. We'll watch them during lunch. So there's a lot of extra value you get from having an all access pass. So it is expensive, but there's a lot of value added there. Yeah. So Ryan Miller asks, I'm in the AAA industry and this is my first GDC event. Is there anything I should have in mind now that I'm on the other side? Because before he'd been as a student, sorry. Anything different from being a student to being employed, I guess?
The main thing is be careful of how you represent yourself in social situations, especially if you don't actually have the jurisdiction to speak on your company's behalf. You don't want to accidentally imply that anything you say can be taken as official company business or correspondence. So unless you're actually capable of doing that for your company, and I would check with your legal team or whatever, whoever's in charge at your company before going, make sure that you don't misrepresent yourself or your company. And that's actually probably the most important thing to consider from a professionalism sort of standpoint. That's why some companies only issue business cards to people who are officially there on business for the company. This does not apply to everybody, obviously, but that is something to keep in mind and to check on before you go to GDC. That's the only thing I can really think of. Otherwise, network as usual. You're probably not nearly as desperate to get into the industry at this point, so you can be a little more natural and comfortable. Yeah, that's really the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I think I was just way more comfortable. So even from when I got my first job, when I worked in casual games, to when I worked in like a big fancy like studio everybody knew the name of, it just continues to be more comfortable in that like people don't, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes people will question why you were there, like not at GDC, but like at a party or something. People are like, who are you? Why are you here? As someone who's in the industry, people just don't ask that question anymore. You just say, oh, I work for X, and they're like, oh, okay. So it is definitely more comfortable. It's also way less stressful because you're not like, I'm competing for like to be noticed as a student along with all these other students or new people trying to get in. So I felt it was a lot less stressful. But the main thing is, remember, you now represent a company. Even if you don't go there representing that company, you will tell someone, oh, I work at X, and then you might make a mistake and they're going to associate you with that company. So be very careful.
Yeah. And if you're in a situation where they're trying to make that connection with your company, you can be like, hey, let me get your info and I'll pass you on to the right person. Like, that's what you should do in that kind of situation. And also, just a really side note, I know we're out of time, but if you are a student, there's actually a lot of like thought on this, but it's generally sort of advised against putting student as your title on your GDC badge when you register for your badge. Even though it's pretty unfair, there is some stigma against students because basically professionals will be like, oh, this is somebody who's going to hit me up for a job. And some people are more amenable to that than others. But I would actually advise putting basically what you're studying to be. So artist, designer, engineer, producer, whatever. That's always safer. And then if you get into conversation, you can explain, yeah, I'm currently studying for that. But avoid putting student on your badge.
I always joke with people that my first GDC with my rookie business card, it said Grant Schunkweiler, programmer, designer, producer. And I would go up to people, my badge said like audio programmer or something because that's what I was into. And people would be like, well, what are you? And I'm like, I'm a programmer who has design experience. And it's just ironic that now, like 9 years later, I've been a programmer, designer, producer on a bunch of ship titles. I'm like, oh yeah, showed you all up. But yeah, it's really important that you put the job that you want to be going for, not just student. I'm going to hit 2 of these questions super fast, and then we'll talk about this last one, then we'll wrap things up. Oh, and someone in the chat said the name of the other food court was in the Westfield Mall. So that's important. So I'm not even going to try to say this person's name. It's XIAOTI606. First question was, is there a cheap, easy way to have your resume on a website since losing paper is highly probable? Ryan Miller said, I keep my resume just on Wix.com. Works super well through the years. You can also just have it in a Google Doc, which
or Drive. Or Dropbox is what I meant to say. Sorry.
Yep. What is your opinion on resume business cards, aka having selling points instead of just space? I personally am of the opinion that it should just be your contact information and your job title or what you want to do. Having like the Photoshop and stuff. If I'm interested, I'll go look up your website or
I generally advise using your business cards as a mini resume. Don't do it. Unless you're an artist, then you can use the back as maybe an example of your work. That's about it.
Yeah, one of the absolute coolest cards I've ever gotten is from someone who draws magic cards, and she also does a bunch of concept art. And it was a little like manila envelope, and like you pulled it out, and it was like 3 paintings that she had done in miniature form, each with like contact info. But she had made like 14 overall, and she was like, you try and collect them all.
Yay!
I was like, wait, I'm gonna take all your business cards. But that was really cool.
And sorry, quick note, I know we're running out of time again, but like if you are an artist who wants to create business cards that have samples of your work on it, moo.com is great because you can print a unique back on every single card in the set you get. They are a little bit more expensive, but the paper quality and the print quality are fantastic, and they are the only service I know of where you can create sets of unique cards like that. So just keep in mind.
Yeah, Moo is amazing. So let's talk about this one real quick, and then we'll end it up. Ganesh asked, on the topic of self-introduction, can you give us a good example?
It's pretty simple. Hi, I'm Karena. How are you? And if they want to know more about you from that, then you can tell them, yeah, I work in, I go to school here, or I work at this company and I do X, like I am a producer. And if they ask you like, oh yeah, what have you produced in the past? They can go into a little bit more of like, like, oh yeah, I worked on these projects. But like, it's kind of natural. Like you don't have to have a prepared script. Usually just introducing yourself by your name is pretty square and solid.
Yeah, that's exactly what I expected you to answer, and that's the same thing I would say. It's good to have talking points about yourself in your mind, but it's yourself, right? So literally your talking points are the things that you're interested in and the things that you do. But I think it's kind of awkward to walk up and be like, hi, I'm Grant, I'm a producer at Epic Games, and what I do is this. Instead, if I just walk up and I say, hi, I'm Grant, nice to meet you, and then the conversation will just flow. We'll ask questions about each other, and it's a lot more natural. And again, it's more about making friends than it is about just like giving someone your resume in verbal form.
Yeah, you're trying to create genuine connections with people. So try to feel comfortable about that. Like even if you are not really a socially savvy person, like get out of the mindset of I am trying to present this polished and amazing version of myself, and be more like I would like to actually get to know this person, like you would with any other person that you meet. And I think that'll help you be a lot more comfortable in your conversations, and it'll be a little more smooth for everybody involved.
Yep. All right, cool. Thank you so much for joining us. You're just a fount of knowledge and so much brilliant stuff. I highly recommend anybody that watched this, just watch it again. And I'll post it up so people can watch it again. And once you finish that document, I'll make sure to share that out with people. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers.